The deadline is impossible. The customer data is wrong. The new process will create twice as much work. Everyone in the meeting can see the problem. Yet the room stays strangely calm. People adjust a slide, soften a sentence, and move to the next agenda item. Later, in private messages, they say what they knew all along. Why do smart employees stay silent about an obvious problem? The easy explanation is cowardice. If people were braver, they would speak. But speaking up at work is not a personality quiz. It is a decision under uncertainty. An employee asks 2 questions, often in a fraction of a second. Will saying this change anything? And what might it cost me? When the expected benefit is small and the personal risk is real, silence can be a rational response to the environment. In 2000, organizational scholars Elizabeth Morrison and Francis Millikan named the collective pattern organizational silence. Their argument was not simply that one nervous employee withholds one comment. Powerful organizational forces can make many people withhold information about potential problems. Over time, employees form a shared belief that speaking up is either pointless or unwise. Silence becomes a property of the climate, not just a private choice. That climate usually contains 2 beliefs. First, speaking up is futile. The decision is already made, the boss will not listen, or nothing will happen after the meeting. Second, speaking up is dangerous. You may be labeled difficult, negative, disloyal, or not a team player. One belief removes the reward, the other raises the cost. Together, they make silence feel like the safest professional move. Silence often begins with assumptions at the top. Some managers believe employees are mainly self-interested, that leaders know best, and that disagreement threatens unity. Those beliefs may never appear in a policy. They appear in who gets invited, which questions are welcomed, how bad news is discussed, and whether dissent is treated as useful data or a loyalty problem. A climate is built from repeated management choices. Employees do not need a written threat to learn the rule. They watch tiny reactions. A manager sighs when someone raises a risk. A question is answered with, "We already covered that." The messenger is excluded from the next meeting. A colleague who warned early is remembered as negative. Each event may look small. Together they teach the room which information is welcome and which information has a social price. Hierarchy makes the calculation uneven. The person closest to the problem may have the least authority to challenge the plan. Their manager controls assignments, visibility, ratings, and future opportunities. Even a well-intentioned leader can underestimate that dependence. Saying, "My door is always open," does not remove the power difference. The question is not whether the door is open, it is what happened to the last person who walked through it with bad news. Now the pattern becomes collective. One employee notices that a warning disappeared. Another sees the boss reward confident agreement. A third hears, "Do not bring problems without solutions." Nobody needs to coordinate. People compare signals, copy safe behavior, and stop testing the boundary. Soon the meeting looks genuinely aligned. But the agreement is partly manufactured by selection. Only the safest information is still entering the room. The dangerous part is what leaders see next. Because warnings are filtered out, reports become cleaner, meetings become smoother, and dashboards become greener. Management may conclude that the plan is working and the team agrees. That false confidence creates more top-down decisions, which creates more silence. The organization is not missing intelligence. It is destroying the route by which intelligence travels upward. This is why an open-door policy is weak medicine. It asks the lower power person to identify the problem, judge the politics, interrupt the boss, and absorb the risk. A suggestion box can fail for the same reason if messages disappear without a response. Even asking any concerns often produces silence because it is broad, public, and easy to answer with none. Access is not the same as evidence that voice will be useful and safe. Psychological safety helps, but it is often misunderstood as being nice or avoiding conflict. A psychologically safer team can disagree, report mistakes, and challenge assumptions without treating the interpersonal risk as career suicide. Research across many samples links psychological safety with voice and learning, related outcomes. But employees judge it through evidence. What happens after a mistake? Who can question the plan? Does the leader become curious, defensive, or punitive? The first repair is to ask better questions. Do not ask, does everyone agree? Ask, what are we missing? Which assumption is weakest? What would make this fail in the next 30 days? Then let the most senior person speak last. Specific questions lower the social cost of dissent because disagreement becomes part of the task. The leader is no longer asking for courage. The meeting is designed to produce disconfirming information. The second repair is the response. A leader's first 10 seconds teach more than a poster about speaking up. Start with thank you. Separate the messenger from the message. Ask what they observed, what evidence exists, and what would reduce uncertainty. You do not have to agree or act immediately. You do have to avoid ridicule, interrogation, or visible retaliation. A predictable first response turns voice from a personal gamble into a normal work process. The third repair is closing the loop. If someone raises a concern and hears nothing, they learn that voice is futile, even if the leader listened politely. Record the issue. Name an owner. Give a date for the next update. Then explain the decision, acted on, testing, deferred, or declined, and why. Not every concern should win. But every serious concern needs a visible path. People keep speaking when they can see how information moves. A voice-friendly organization does not treat every objection as correct. Some concerns are incomplete, badly timed, confidential, or outside the speaker's evidence. People also have a legitimate right to privacy. The goal is not constant public disagreement. The goal is a fair process for relevant information. Challenge the claim, request evidence, and make a decision without punishing the person for raising it in good faith. Safety is not immunity from scrutiny. To diagnose silence, do not begin with a culture slogan. Trace the last piece of bad news. Who noticed it? Where did they raise it? What was the first response? Who owned the follow-up? What changed? And what did everyone else learn from watching? If you cannot trace that path, your organization may be measuring the absence of voice as the absence of problems. The real test is simple. Does truth travel upward without destroying the messenger? Leaders also have to go first. If the most powerful person performs certainty, everyone else must spend status to introduce doubt. A better signal is visible fallibility. Here is what I may be missing. Here is the assumption I am least confident about. Here is the decision I changed after new evidence. That is not weak leadership. It gives other people permission to update the system before reality does it more painfully. Finally, do not measure voice by counting comments. A noisy meeting can still ignore the important warning. Measure the pathway instead. How quickly are concerns acknowledged? How many receive an owner? How often does the organization explain the outcome? Do people at lower levels use the channel again after a difficult response? The goal is not maximum speaking. It is reliable movement of relevant information from the edge of the organization to the place where action is possible.